It works. Okay. Hi, guys. It is great to see you today. As she said, this is modern-day slavery and human trafficking towards women, the Kafala system in Middle Eastern countries. I am Racquel González. I am a senior in criminal justice, Spanish, and African American studies. And this is my first year as an ISCORE scholar.
Hi, my name is Chadwick. I am currently a sophomore, and this is my first year here at ISCORE, and I am studying horticulture and Spanish.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arwa Hassan. I am a junior studying public relations with a minor in entrepreneurship, and I'm also a Greenlee ambassador at the Greenlee School. This is also my first year as an ISCORE scholar.
So just a quick trigger warning, this presentation that we're going to show you guys does contain a lot of material regarding human trafficking, slavery and abuse, physical, sexual, mental, and emotional, and physiological as well, and there are mentions of death as well. So just putting that out there for you guys. If that's something that you're not comfortable with, we're just letting you know now that that sort of thing is going to be in our presentation. And then we also have a land acknowledgement for you guys. So we just want to start off by saying that Iowa State University is located on the ancestral lands and territory of the Bakotsi or Iowa Nation. The United States obtained the land from the Meskwaki and Sauk nations in the Treaty of 1842, and we just want to recognize our obligations that we have to the land and to the people who took care of it, as well as the 17,000 Native Americans that are still here living in Iowa today.
So for the overview, we're just going to have a research question and the methods, a brief summary of the Kafala system, and then we're going to define neo-slavery, working living conditions and treatment, women's specific abuse, the Kafala system and the ties that has with Iowa State University, and then just ways to combat the Kafala system as an Iowa State student, a faculty member, whatever the case might be.
So to keep this interactive and interesting, we have come up with 2 different activities for you guys to do throughout the presentation. We set it into 2 different parts, so there's going to be discussion questions, and you guys are going to talk amongst yourselves into little groups, whoever's to your left and right. And then if you're comfortable with sharing with us, we can talk about it as a room. And we have little timers for you guys to keep this on track. And then there's going to be a Google form. So on each of these slides, it will preface that this is a Google form question. And there's a QR code. It's quiz-like to make sure that you guys are paying attention, keeping along with us. And then you're just going to fill out the text box with your answer. And we will see if you are correct or incorrect, on the right track, whatever it may be.
So here we just kind of have a discussion question to get things started and just kind of get you guys thinking about what we're going to be talking about. So what comes to your mind first thing when you think about modern day slavery? Like, just could be like thoughts, ideas, like what do you think slavery looks like today versus what we've previously known slavery to look like? So kind of just talk amongst yourselves, people around you, in your head. If you want to raise your hand, speak out, feel free to do that as well.
We cannot use the timers. It goes straight to...
Well, it's still screen sharing, so I think
It's not going up.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they don't have to know.
So only Zoom can see it. Timer.
Okay, so let's not do that.
At least we know. So it's okay.
We're good?
Yeah, that's
Can I test the next slide really quick?
of sounds like we've had a little bit of discussion here. So if we just want to bring it back, and if anyone wants to share a little bit about what you talked about with people around you, if you don't want to share, that's okay too. Yeah, kind of just throw some ideas out there. Raise your hands, just scream at me, whatever you want to do. Yeah. Yeah, that was really good. And we're actually going to talk a lot about what you mentioned, like the domestic sort of thing, and how it's very hidden in our presentation. So it's great that you already have some knowledge about that. Anyone else want to share at all? Not totally fine as well. Yeah, back there. Right, yeah, totally. And then I saw a hand come up over here as well. Yeah, that's a great example as well.
Those are very fresh answers too. We have some of our fellow scholars over here, ISCORE scholars, and they have heard this presentation multiple times, and these are very new concepts to us, so this was really good discussion. All right, we're gonna move on to the key terms.
So number one, the Kafala system. It's a system to monitor migrant laborers working primarily in the construction and domestic sectors in Middle Eastern countries. For neo-slavery, it's a new or modern form of slavery, and we're gonna go over that in depth a little more throughout the presentation. So just to give some context, sponsor or a kafil is an employer of a foreign worker. They own most of the control over the migrant workers, employment, and immigration status.
All right, so just a little bit more discussion for you guys. We're going to have a bit of a prediction. So what do you guys think will happen throughout the presentation? Do you think we'll find that racial and social identities will affect whether or not someone is a neo-slave? And if you do think that racial and social identities would play a part in this, which ones? So like, do you think it's based on gender, sex, sexuality, race, that sort of thing? So again, just kind of discuss amongst yourselves around the room. What social identities do you think might play a part into this?
Yep. We need to, after this, we'll just go back really quick, but I think it was like the research.
Right.
Wait, hold on. Let me see. Yeah, okay. We'll go back. Okay, we'll just go back and then skip forward. And I have the clickers.
Yeah, I'll just let you do.
No, you're good, you're good. With the tutorial then, if it just directly, like how are we supposed to play that for then and to this one?
We can flag that. All right, guys. So it sounds like there's a lot of really good discussion going on amongst the crowd here. So again, if you'd like to, feel free to share. If not, that's okay too. So just, yeah, what are some social identities or some stuff that you guys discussed? And I saw a hand come up. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So for the folks that are here virtually on Zoom, I'll just repeat the response for you guys. So our lovely crowd member said that just the vulnerable populations will be kind of the ones that are going to be more affected. So maybe if we're talking about other countries, maybe domestic situations, women and children would be more susceptible, or like perhaps people in jail too would be more susceptible. So different social identities. That was a very good response, and thank you for being so interactive. And then were there any other responses anyone else wanted to share? Yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you so much for speaking out. We appreciate it. And then again, for the folks on Zoom, this crowd member just said that perhaps like homeless or youth here in America, that could be another population that could be affected by this as well. Any other? Yeah, back here. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so for folks on Zoom, just here, like maybe depending on the language that you speak or your immigration status, that could play a part into it as well. Yep. So for folks on Zoom, religious affiliations play a part in that as well, definitely. Anyone else want to? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And we'll kind of get into that as well, just how colorism affects neo-slavery status as well. Thank you, guys. Any other responses before we move on? All right.
All right, so instead of just giving you an informative presentation, we also wanted to make this more research-based as well. So we do have a research question and an explanation of the methodology that we use throughout. We kind of wanted to be able to quantify it and give it more sustenance. So our research question is, how do racial and social identities impact the likelihood or deterrent effect of coming into a neo-slave status? So something that you will recognize pretty soon throughout our presentation is that the narratives of neo-slaves and these migrant workers abroad, it's really hard to find personal stories due to the fact of just different laws and restrictions and the lack of freedom that they hold. There's a lot of dangers and threats that come with speaking out against such a strong and solidified system such as this, and an oppressive system. So it was really hard to be able to, you know, take an interview approach by any means, because you don't really know specifically who these people are, and you guys will see that here pretty soon. We'll explain this all. But so we decided to take a quantitative approach and utilize survey in a secondary approach as well. So this means that we collected data from secondary sources. This is existing research. These are already publications made, and we took it from there as opposed to, you know, going out, talking one-on-one, different things like that, because this is where the most data is able to be found. And a lot of it is anonymous as well. So we don't really have specific names or anything like that, but you will see how we conducted this in a little bit.
So what is the Kafala system? Kafala, or sponsorship system, gives private citizens and companies in Jordan, Lebanon, and most Arab Gulf countries almost total control over migrant workers' employment and immigration status. This all came from the purpose of the economy with all the oil blooms. They use that for cheap labor. They're desperate for migrant workers, and they send back like money for home to their families. So a lot of the times it's like if you are a migrant worker in Saudi Arabia and maybe you live in Ethiopia, the Saudi Riyal is actually more expensive, so you'll have more money to send back, which gives them more of a motivation. So let's say if it's 1 Saudi Riyal, they're getting like 5, I don't know how, maybe pounds. I don't know what Ethiopia has, but just to give you some context over there. And then for sponsors, migrant workers live in sponsors' home or in dorms or accommodations that they provide.
All right, what is neo-slavery? We just want to preface that this is just another word for modern or contemporary slavery. It is the term that we decided that we wanted to utilize for this presentation, and it refers to institutional slavery that continues to occur in our present day world. There are estimated 38 million to 46 million people enslaved across the world today, and then the International Labor Organization estimates that there are 24.9 million people in forced labor, 16 million of whom are exploited in fields such as domestic work, construction, or agriculture. And then the people within the Kafala system, both in domestic and the manual labor sectors, constitute as neo-slaves.
And then just to give you guys a little bit more context on where exactly in the world we're talking about, we're going to be talking about Gulf countries. And you can see on the map here, the orange countries are going to be the countries that are using the Kafala system. And we could not find any numbers on how many people there are working under the Kafala system in Jordan and Oman. The numbers were inconclusive, so I didn't want to just throw a random number in there for you guys, but I was able to find data on Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. And so there you can see here on the side, I put in the numbers there. So Lebanon has 250,000 people that are working under the Kafala system, 10 million in Saudi Arabia, 620,000 in Kuwait. There's 100,000 in Bahrain. In Qatar, there are 2 million. And then in the UAE, there are 8 million.
In the workforce in Gulf states by immigration status, there are 70% migrant workers and 30% native-born workers.
So a lot of this presentation is going to revolve around, obviously, the negatives of this system. We are most definitely not going to, go into the highlights by any means. So the abuses that you see are low wages. A lot of times it is below the poverty line. It's not fulfilling a livable wage. And it is completely up to the sponsor or employer as to how much someone makes. There are a lack of regulations. You're going to see that more later on in this presentation. But just to elaborate on that a little bit, the Kafala workers do not have a place in these different countries as constitutions. So they do not have workers' rights, and we'll go into that a little bit more later on. There are poor working conditions, just due to the time that it takes to work during the day, the lack of rest days, different things like that. There's employee abuse, and we'll go more into the gendered abuse, but there is sexual violence. It's very prevalent, especially in the domestic sectors. And racial and gender discrimination is very prominent in the Kafala system as well.
So for race and ethnicity, we looked at like what countries have the majority of the migrant workers. So we have Philippines, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, and then Bangladesh. And then I'm just gonna go over the word abid. This is just to give you more context. So I used to live in Sudan, and I would hear this word sometimes. The closest thing that I can relate it to is the N-word. It's a derogatory term to make someone feel like they are less than and that they are supposed to listen to a higher up. You're basically considered physically inferior, and anything that you do closely related to that derogatory term is frowned upon. In that culture, you are not, like, anything that has to do with domestic work, anything that has to do with even working at a restaurant, they will stereotype you as someone that is an abid. Just to give you more context on that. And then even people that are Asian and then African diplomats, they are reported being mistaken as a servant and treated with disrespect. So even if they're going to like Saudi Arabia and they're a prime minister, they're still treated poorly, even though their working status is higher than maybe a Saudi Arabian or something like that.
So some more discussion for us. So just regarding kind of the discussion about that previous derogatory term, why do you guys believe that oppressors create false and insulting narratives about those that they are oppressing? So kind of why are these people that are in positions of power, why do they make up these things to kind of oppress those that are what they think to be below them?
And to help with this a little bit, I like to think about, it helps me compare and contrast with the stereotypes made about black people during US slavery. Think about like Jim Crow, those different stereotypes, those different caricatures. Why were the oppressors creating those narratives? What was the reason for that? It will help you answer this question a little bit better.
All right, so I hate to cut off all this beautiful discussion that I'm hearing, but I just want to make sure that we'll have time for questions and that sort of thing at the end. So if we just want to kind of come back and just throw some ideas out there, what did you guys kind of discuss? So one of our folks here in a live audience said for you folks on Zoom that it's kind of like a dehumanizing thing almost, because then it makes it a little bit easier for the oppressor to kind of disconnect it and not feel as bad about what they're doing. That was a great comment. Thank you. Anyone else want to share out what they kind of discussed? Yeah. Right. So even like more so, not even just individual, like that just makes it kind of so the whole country even has that same mindset. Yeah. Yeah, back here.
I guess it's all about turning it into a social norm so that like no one really cares if like these people are being oppressed anyways.
Yeah, right, exactly. So for our folks on Zoom again, just kind of making it more like a social norm, normalizing it so that way if you see this happening, you won't even think twice about it, you know, just kind of make it seem like another day kind of thing.
All right, thank you for those answers.
So we'll kind of just go into a little bit more of the kind of salary comparison so you can see what these people are earning that are working under the Kafala system. So we have here salaries of those working in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. So here on the left side, you'll see that the minimum salary for a domestic worker in Saudi Arabia is going to be 1,000 rials, which is about 275 US dollars. And that's what they'll be getting monthly. And there is also a minimum required allowance for the domestic worker of 300 rials specifically for food, and then 500 for housing. So they would get total of $800 to be able to pay for their housing and their food. And then that 275 will just be like kind of their spending money that they get to take home, send back home, put in their pocket. And then in Kuwait, the minimum salary of a domestic worker in Kuwait is going to be 110 to 120 Kuwaiti dinar, which is just under 400 US dollars per month. And then there was no requirement for like food or housing allowance. So they would just be getting that 110 to 120 dinar.
So why is this happening? In simple terms, it's just because of the oil economy. Petroleum production drove demand for labor, demand for low cost, labor increase, and then the kafala system was the solution. So can you think of any examples where the economy affects how people are treated or impacts what they are asked to do?
Yeah, we kind of went off, but it's fine. Did you want to do, like, the next couple of them are going to be, like, the video, so it's going to be the trigger warning, the video, and then a question after that. You want to do that? It was just, like,
That's fine.
yeah, because I, yeah,
It's okay. It's okay. We got this. I'm like sweaty.
I'm just, okay, now I'm afraid we're not going to, like, we're going to go over time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, like, keep it.
Especially because of the video too. Isn't that like 5 minutes? Oh, that's cute. Hey, can you do like the rephrasing for Zoom? Because I'm not gonna remember. Yeah, like I'm sorry.
All right, guys. Again, I always hate cutting you guys off. I love hearing all the discussion, but I just want to make sure we've got enough time to get through everything. So we're going to have a couple responses here. So what did you guys kind of discuss, and what do you think? What are some examples or kind of things you thought about that might affect how people are treated during the economy? Yeah, over here. Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's something that I know I've seen personally, a lot of companies, and I know a lot of people nowadays are kind of looking into what companies, are doing in terms of like their production and making sure they're doing things ethically. So just, yeah, for the folks on Zoom, one of our audience members said like big companies like Nike are kind of having their workers do their work like overseas in countries where, regulations are lower, they don't have to pay them as much. And then I saw a hand go up over here, yeah. Yeah, for sure. So for our Zoom folks, our audience member said that for maybe immigrants that don't have all their paperwork or their citizen status isn't like a citizen, if they're kind of working, for jobs where they're getting paid like under the table sort of thing, and they're not really, the employer has that power to be like, well, I'm giving you this job that you you're not a citizen, so you shouldn't have it. So, there's kind of that sort of thing where the employee is almost kind of forced into whatever situation the employer puts them in, just because, they don't have a lot of options for other work that they can do. So, yeah, the immigration status definitely can affect how people are treated and this sort of idea as well. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to our next slide here.
So we are gonna watch a video, and just to give you a trigger warning, it contains graphic content about physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse, racism, and death. So if you cannot handle that, feel free to go hide in the bathroom maybe, and then come back. We'll let you know.
IT guy to the rescue here. 1 second, guys.
Okay, the original plan. The original plan was to. So sorry about this technical difficulty. We were gonna watch the video, and it was one of the very few instances where we could actually see personal narratives when it came to the neo-slaves and the different domestic workers. But we go over a lot of the information anyways, but we just wanted to like put a face to the name basically. But we are going to move on and talk about the rest of our presentation. All right, we're gonna move on from that as well. All right, so we're gonna go more into the gendered discrimination that we see within the kafala system. So how are women disproportionately affected by this? Women, they typically work as maids. The kafils tend to sexually abuse the migrant workers, considering it is a more private, inclusive type of environment where this takes place in homes. They're able to get away with a lot more. There's not so many instances of social workers just showing up to the place and making sure that these women are okay. So a lot goes unnoticed, and women choose low-skilled women to control, and they're also beaten a lot of the time. And then when it comes to men, they typically work as personal drivers. They work 16-hour shifts, no rest days. And then as you saw from the different base pays that they receive, they have deducted, delayed, or no pay at all.
And so just some more discussion for us. What are some predictions as to how many women make up the migrant workforce? So just a hint for you guys, there are 23 million total migrant workers working in the Gulf states. So kind of just a fun little question, like what are your predictions as to how many women or what percentage or what number you guys might think? All right, so we don't have too much time left, so I just want to make sure we have enough time to get through everything. So if anyone wants to kind of throw some numbers out there, what are we thinking? 83%. So you think 83% are women? Okay, all right. Anyone else want to take a guess? 75%. All right, all right. Well, let's see here. It's actually a lot lower of a number than you may think. So total 23 million migrant workers, 10 million migrant workers in Saudi Arabia alone, and 9 million of those 23 million are women.
Okay, so one of the reasons why women are targeted so often is because there's an increased number of Arab women in the workforce. So the perceptions of women's duties and what they're capable of has changed, as well as within these Gulf states, there is an increased wealth within the families. And then the people surrounding them, the locals within those countries, they refuse to do household tasks because there is this societal perception that this is the lowest of the low in terms of occupations, and it is a dignity and status type of thing. So we do have a Google form.
If you guys would like to, just really quick, scan the QR code. We did have a Google form, but we don't have a whole lot of time left. So if you'd like to, feel free to go ahead and do that.
And then just go ahead and work on that on your phone. But we're gonna, for the sake of time, keep on moving. So we'll keep it up here for a second just to scan, and then we will see your results at the end.
So we're just gonna, for the sake of time, move on. So if you don't get it scanned, don't worry. It's not the end of the world. We'll be okay.
All right, so we do have a statistic here. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimated that between 2014 to 2017, all 88 victim reports were women and girls being subjected to sexual exploitation, meaning that in those 3 years, only 88 victim reports for sexual exploitation were filed. And this is very hard to believe that that is the actual number, considering the type of abuse that goes on. So that just goes to show how threatened and scared that these women and children feel.
So we're just going to go into some more of the systemic factors that go into why women are targeted, and kind of the stuff that they experience while they're being targeted. So there are work contracts within the Kafala system. These can be written or they can be oral. So I know a lot of, like here in the US, if there's a contract, you know, you've got to have it printed on a piece of paper and you actually go in and sign it. But in these Gulf countries where the Kafala system is being used, they can just have oral contracts or oral legally binding contracts. So there's no proof of anything. It's just all kind of word of mouth. And for the laws in these Gulf countries, they don't have a lot of protection laws for the migrant workers. And also the migrant workers aren't citizens of these countries, so they're not protected by the laws of the country. The private homes are not supervised by labor inspectors. It's not like here in the US, you know, where the OSHA people come and make sure everything's up to code and that sort of thing. Especially not for the domestic workers when they're actually working inside someone's private home. They're not gonna have any labor inspectors coming into someone's home. And a lot of times, you know, no one even knows that these people have domestic workers in their home. So people don't even know that there's someone in there working. And then with police, there's a lack of reporting to police. And within like the culture and the Kafala system, it's kind of frowned upon if you go and speak out. It's like, why are you making this private family matter public? It's kind of like airing out dirty laundry. And so that's not a common thing there. And then prosecution, it's kind of the same thing. There's not a lot of prosecution that happens because it's like a moral crime, not like a actual like physical crime or something like that. So it's more so kind of the way that their society works. It's like more so keep it within your family. It's like, why bring it to court? They kind of don't do that. So it's hard for women in this position to kind of get help. And then there's a lot of sex trafficking that can happen as well, because these women are constantly being sold to other families to go and work. And so a lot of times sex trafficking happens with that as well.
All right, so just an overview of other things that happen within this gender discrimination. Before a woman even goes to travel to this other country to work, she's required to take a pregnancy test, HIV test, cholesterol levels, fitness levels, eye, speech, and hearing. She may be injected with contraceptives with or without her knowledge in order to prevent any pregnancy. Recruiters change their names to sound more Muslim because that is what they're seeking. And so families struggle to find their loved ones when they go to look up their names, and it cannot be found because that's not what they're going by. And then it is within Gulf countries as laws. It's not uncommon to see that women are not allowed to travel without a male companion. All right, we have run out of time. Technical difficulties did not help much, but just to finish this up really quick, yes, identities do play into being a neo-slave. These are the different statuses that affect that: temporary worker, female, African, Asian, and domestic worker. And different things to help combat this is student activism, suggesting a speaker to come to ISU for lecture series, requesting different materials online. There's very few here, so go ahead and request those resources and learn more about it. And then there's different ways to donate: sign petitions, share, volunteer, learn more about it, and protest. So these are our resources, and this is our emails. If you guys have any questions that we were not able to answer today, go ahead and shoot us an email. Thank you for coming.